I think it's so much more beneficial to focus on that reframe, because if we continue to stay in the same mindset that doing the same things that we've always done, we can get passed up by how things change.
You could look at that as a failure because it didn't work and it stopped. But if we reframe failure and to be able to say, well, that's okay, it didn't work, but let's track back and let's figure out how to do it again. Let's keep going. It's this inspirational piece where you go, let's keep going, we can do this. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Lean Solutions podcast. My name is Catherine McDonald and I'm joined here today by my brilliant co-host Shayne Daughenbaugh.
Easy on the accolades, the brilliant.
Shayne, there's no other word for you. How are you today?
You know what? I'm doing all right. I can't complain. I also don't have a lot of reasons to raise up my hand and say woohoo, but I do love the journey that I'm on. So
good stuff. And isn't that a normal day for most of us? Let's
say that. Let's say even in the podcast land, we still have normal days. There are some days that are better than others, and some days that we're just here to just try to figure our stuff out, learn something, and improve upon it for the next day.
That is such a great way to think.
I say that now. What am I saying inside? We won't talk about that. But what comes out right now is this is what I want to believe in. So I'm going to continue to tell myself that as it's act of rebellion against, a negative way of thinking, a way that is just stagnant. Yes. That's what it is. Yes.
I get you. I totally get you. And it's very honest and open. So thank you for that, for being so honest and open. And today we are going to talk about failures. And for anybody who's listening, you may have heard our last episode, which was part 1 of a 3-part series. So today is actually part 2 in a series where we're talking about failures in the workplace, overcoming failures, rethinking, reframing failures. That's what this 3-part series is all about. So if you were listening to our last episode, it was myself and Patrick, and I know Shayne, you weren't there, but just to give our listeners a little bit of insights and a little bit of a summary of what we covered, because you might want to go back and listen to that if you haven't already, or you might need a reminder of what we talked about. So myself and Patrick talked a little bit about reframing failure. So what actually is failure? And is failure really a bad thing? Because a lot of people seem to think it is. There's a very negative connotation around the word failure.
Right.
And it's something that a lot of people and organizations actively try to avoid.
I actively try to avoid.
Yes, we all do. We do, because we think of it as negative, and oftentimes it feels negative. Therefore, it is negative to us, right? So Patrick and I talked a little bit about that, and you can go back and listen to that conversation. And Patrick also mentioned some of the really famous people out there, like Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb, Sarah Blakely, who invented Spanx, James Dyson, who invented obviously Dyson. And all these people talk about all the failures and challenges that they've come up against in order to get to the success that they have today. So we know from listening to, and he mentioned multiple people, we know that extreme challenges and failures are definitely part of growing and learning and success. We know this. So our conversation today, I suppose, is just going to build on what myself and Patrick talked about. And myself and Patrick shared, Shayne, you weren't there, but we shared a few personal stories around our experiences of coming up against challenges, sometimes failures, sometimes near failures. Patrick talked about his days as a young manager and what, he could have done differently or should have done differently. I did the same. I talked about a personal experience where I've overcome a real fear and a real challenge in terms of public speaking. Not overcome it, actually. I've never overcome it, but I've gotten a bit better to the point.
But you have it. Like
I can function.
You're no longer controlled by it.
Yes, that's it, right? And that was a real challenge, right? But it made me stronger, and everything I had to go through to get to that point was awful. But I'm so glad I got through it and have to get
It
through
was
it, right?
awful.
So, well, yeah, sometimes it feels awful. It feels, and that's part of how we get through and manage and look at failures, is accepting that the feeling isn't good. But trying to process that feeling, to understand the thoughts behind it, to get to the learning and understand that this is not just a negative emotion, it's part of learning, and trying to change our mindsets to think that way. Well, that's the way I look at it anyway. Shayne, would you be in agreement in terms of the whole argument for reframing failure? And is it something that, even on a challenge perspective or near failure perspective, is it something that you've ever come up against? And what is your experience of maybe trying to get through it?
No, Catherine, I have never come up against failure. I don't need to reframe it because it's just not there, and I'm completely lying right now.
Yeah, I need a different co-host. Come in. You're off.
Someone else that really understands failure, because I don't. It's not
Obviously
a part of. I just reject that. I really love that idea of failure being reframed, and because if the typical way, at least the way I think, and because this is how I think, and I'm in my own head, I assume that you also think the same thing. But I think of failure as a bad thing. I think of failure as there's so much negativity to it, and man, that word is just so powerful. I can't even come up with another word to a synonym of failure, because it's just like, it is the epitome. It is the end all be all of, you're horrible and you suck. And there's so much that can just spin through that I really love the idea of, let's reframe what failure means, and understand. I think we also need to understand, Catherine, that there's a spectrum of failure. I could completely fail, God forbid, I completely fail my relationship with my wife and do some things to compromise that. That's a different failure than, I had this project at work and I wasn't able to meet whatever the goals are. I failed at meeting those goals, different consequences and whatnot. But in the sense of, certainly in the sense of work, in the sense of, and I liked how you were talking about overcoming your challenges, and that in my head, where I went with that is the idea of growth.
Yeah.
Because it's the challenges that make us grow. That and without those, maybe we wouldn't. I've recently, here in these last several years, I challenged myself. I had a big giant challenge that I wanted to walk 50 miles with 35 pounds on my back in less than 20 hours before I turned 50. So it was when I was 49. We're not going to talk about how old I am right now, but that challenge could have been a failure, because when I first started walking that, just even thinking what was possible, I was so limited. As soon as, I started with, hey, I can do this. Like, it's just walking, right? Anyone can just walk. I mean, yeah, it's 50 miles, but I could just walk. And as soon as I started I remember the first couple of weeks, it took a huge reframe, because I was doing maybe 4 miles, maybe 5 miles, and thinking, holy cow, there is no way I'm going to be able to accomplish all the way there to 50. But reframing the whole conversation in my head about, hey, it's not about perfection now, but we're striving for that perfection. And I think we'll probably get into this later, talk about lean thinking and what some of that lean thinking is. That is kind of a component of, striving for perfection is a component of thinking differently and reframing this idea of failure. And I think it's so much more beneficial to focus on that reframe and to see things, for just to make it really kind of elementary, to see things as an experiment.
Yes.
It's a grand experiment. Let's see what can happen if we do this.
Yes.
What can happen if we do this? Let's try this. Let's try this. Because if we continue to stay in the same mindset and doing the same things that we've always done, we can get passed up by how things change, whether it be our customers, Maybe we have a certain way that we've always marketed, and our customer base changes. And so that marketing, that certain way, we got to change that. Or technology. That was one of the huge things that we saw at the state when I was working for the state, is dependence on archaic technology. Our systems and our processes were set up in such a way that they worked really well, years back, but so much has changed that now, we just had to just find ways to experiment and, and try different things to catch up with whatever happens to be next, or where we currently were, in the current state of things.
Yes. And, your word there, experiment, I think that's key, isn't it? Because we had a LinkedIn Live there lately, Shayne, you and I, and the other co-hosts, right, Andy and Patrick, and we talked a lot about, I guess, uncertainty that's coming our way in 2025, but also opportunity and all of the things like AI and technology that are out there that we are going to have to navigate and figure out how it's going to help us, because we have to use it, because if we don't, we're going to fall behind. But if we don't experiment with it, we are never going to, I guess, use it properly, because we're only probably going to use a tiny little bit of it.
Right.
And we'll get passed out, because other people will figure out how to use it before us, and they will use it to get our customers to do the job faster, quicker, better, and we'll fall behind. So this whole idea of experimenting without fear of failure, because there is going to be setbacks and challenges and things that don't work, which could equate failure, it just doesn't work. So it's going to be really, really important, this whole idea of reframing failure and thinking of it as a almost stepping stone or part of improving and developing, isn't it?
Yes. And I love, what you're kind of like beneath the surface of what you're talking about. I love this idea of lean focuses on the possibility rather than the risk, because there's always going to be risk, right? And we can try to find ways to mitigate it, and that's great, but that shouldn't be risk. I don't think is a healthy way to go about it. Like if all we were doing was being afraid of everything, whether it be, if I step outside, it looks kind of icy out there, I might slip and fall, bump my head, and no one's going to find me in my backyard, and I could die out there. Like it could get that extreme to where I just lock myself in. And I wonder, I think we, in businesses and organizations, that same kind of thinking could also be dominant, rather than the thinking of what are the possibilities? Yeah, but what if? Let's try to mitigate those, acknowledge those, understand that this is an experiment. And with experiments, there's bound to be things that don't work. That's okay. We accept that. But it's that progress and that positive outlook that says, hey, we're not there yet. There's still, guess what? There's still more. Instead of thinking negatively, like, hey, we're not, we're never going to be perfect. Oh, but there's still more. We may never be, but look at this space that we can grow. And then, and more space and more space and more space. And just having that positive attitude of being more excited about the potential than being hindered by and fearful of the risk.
Yes, exactly. So well put. No, totally agree. And yet, right, so we know that this will help us if we take this approach, because there is a bigger picture thinking here. Short-term setbacks, little things that don't go right, get in our way, but we have to go through those to understand we have to close that door and open another one that might work, right? So we understand that this is important, but at the same time, I am well aware that there are organizations and people out there who don't support, I guess, that whole approach to mistakes, right?
Sure.
I guess what we're saying is, we're not going out there every day and saying to people, make mistakes, make as many as you want, right? We are saying that if mistakes happen, and we expect that some will when you try something new, it's really important. And this is what Lean does. It gives us spaces to come into together to share, what has happened. Let's together understand it. Let's learn from it. So obviously avoid blame. That's a big part of Lean leadership, is curiosity and collaboration.
Yes, I love that word, curiosity.
Yeah. So I think still, there are some people who don't maybe get the difference in what we're saying, that they think that, oh, we're encouraging mistakes. Tell people it's okay to make them. We're not really saying that. We're saying, if it happens, let's understand why. Let's not judge and say it's a bad thing, so don't make them. I think there's a very important distinction there. Have you seen that? Have you seen that kind of attitude to mistakes and failures where people go, oh no, you can't be having failures?
Yeah, just that whole risk aversion. We're just so afraid of that failure that we'll do anything to avoid it. And typically what that means is we'll just stand still. Like we'll just like shore everything up and make sure that we have everything, here and not have to be exposed to the possibility of whatever risk might be out there. And when you were mentioning that lean thinking provides space for that. The other thing in regards to those that are afraid that we're just saying, hey, just willy-nilly, just go out and just throw everything to the wind, just try whatever it is. But that's not really the way lean is. Lean gives space for that because it also has a structure to it. So we're not just throwing everything and just trying anything and casting the old aside. We're using a very specific structure and a really simple structure to reimagine what could be. And again, reframing into rather than risk, what are the possibilities and potentials? And I'd be interested, Catherine, let's talk about that right now, because I know brand new year, I'm hoping and assuming that we have new listeners, that are to us, to the space. When we say lean thinking, what are some things that come to mind? Like, let's try to, in a simple way, as simple as we can, just define what it means by lean thinking.
Yes. Okay. Well, there is a few elements to it. It's not just one thing, right? We know that. But in my mind, I suppose the most important things to understand are, well, first of all, for me anyway, maybe people have different definitions, but for me, it's involving people doing the work in understanding how work is currently done and hearing and taking on board and working with people to put their ideas for improvement into practice. And it's a cycle of doing this, whereby we do this over and over again. And within that, we have the whole concept of respect for people. So involving people, listening to them, understanding that these are the people who know the job best and they should be treated that way. And they are the ones who should be improving the work. So for me, that's the whole area of respect for people, involve people, and it is all about improving over time. And it is about, when we say improvement, we have to break that down into, I guess, improvement means getting rid of things that are in the way, unnecessary. Some people use the word waste, or we talked about the word noise before, or to improve, what do we need to do? So this is where we go through and use our tools to, as we, there's hundreds of them out there, to help us understand where are the problems and opportunities. And then we use the structure like PDCA, plan, do, check, act, and we create those spaces to bring people doing the work together to put those plans in place, and so that people then can go back out and make the changes to their work, and they have the autonomy to do that. And then they come back and we reflect on that, and it's a cycle of doing that over and over again. To me, that's what lean is. It's not, that was probably longer than you expected, but
I wanted a bulleted list. I didn't want all this application stuff.
I have to explain that without, gosh, that's a really hard thing to do. Like, I could just give you a one sentence on what is lean, but I wouldn't be doing it justice, because I agree. You have to do the linkages between the people, the process, the improvement, the value, and of course the customer comes in there, but it's the people that understand the customer because they're closest to the customer. So it's not simple, but at the same time, I guess it's important for people to have that understanding in their own minds of what lean is before you go out and do the work, right?
Yeah, and to have context to what we're talking about. And I appreciate, there's a couple things you mentioned that I'm gonna grab onto, and then I'm gonna actually share a story of this application. But my definition, if I were, and I think your definition was fantastic. It was spot on. I loved you actually brought it to life. Because what you could think about is, lean thinking has to do with the customer, what the customer values. It has to do with visualizing the value stream, or how the work is done, that it goes from what the customer wants to how I'm going to provide it. creating a smooth way of going about things and not doing things until it's actually necessary. That's the idea of pull, but also pursuing perfection. Like those are very, they're very sterile, can be very sterile words, but you put it in this very fantastic way of actually connecting it to the life of people. And there are two things that I loved you said. One, you mentioned customer, and two, you mentioned empowerment. And so let me tell a story. When I was working for the state, there was a process that we were looking at, and I was given a team, or I should say, a team was empowered to look at the work that they did and reimagine how it could be done. And it's that possibility. Like, let's not worry about the risk right now, because we have things in place that can mitigate that risk. But what are the possibilities that we could change, reimagine however this process is done? And to give context, this was it was a permitting process for the Department of Transportation, where other utilities have to use the right of way to put the cable company or the telephone company or the power company may have to use the right of way to lay some lines or stuff like that. And there was a permitting process for this, and it was the feedback we were getting from our customers, from those utilities, was, this is taking way too long. Why does this take too long? And it took about 19 days on average, but there were some times where for them to get a permit, it would go into 30, 60, 90 days for whatever reason. There's lots of reasons, not all on the DOT, but anyways, we felt like it was too long of a process. So we had a group of people that were empowered to change this and to reimagine how we could do this process. And I had them in the room for 3 days. And by day 2, we had maybe a day and a half left. And we were coming up against some roadblocks that really made it difficult for me to see that this was going to be success. Because I was hoping that we would be able to chop this process down, remove some of the steps. And there was like 125 different steps to this process, again, 19 days. And I was hoping to get it, at least in half for each of those things. But the thing we were running up against was the state statutes that required us to keep some of these process or these steps in. There's just certain things that we couldn't change and couldn't do. And the team was getting very, I guess you could say kind of not frustrated was one, but they were also kind of feeling down about this. And I certainly didn't want that, in regard to this experience for them. So what we did, we went back to the first concept of lean thinking and what is the customer value. So we spent some time thinking about what is the customer value. Like the team just started talking about that. And in talking about that, we used that idea of what the customer valued to look at all of our steps. And some of them, again, we couldn't change because of statute. But there was a big, huge chunk of steps in the middle that had to do with some kind of a deposit, getting some kind of to make sure the utilities cleaned up their, whatever it was they were doing, the dirt was back in the hole or whatever it was. But that deposit step or that deposit section could take a week or more to try to process, to try to give it, and then on the back end to try to give that money back. Did the customer value that? Do they see this as valuable? And the team said, well, probably not. No, like it wasn't anything that they valued. So coming at it from the customer's perspective of this process, this is non-valuable to the customer. Okay, so let's talk about it for us internally. Do we need this? Well, no, we just have it as a way to mitigate risk. And so then we asked, well, how often have you had to use this? Have you had to keep this deposit? And I think it was in like the last 10 years, it was twice. And so we were like, so why are we doing this? Well, at one point it made sense, but times have changed. However, it was different now. So these people empowered with the idea of what is valuable to the customer decided, hey, what if we tried to take this out? And what if we reimagine this process without this section of it? And what we're finally able to do after even piloting it again, trying to mitigate, let's try something new. And if we fail, fantastic. We'll do it in a way that was safe to fail. Or I should say to experiment. Let's change that word to experiment. the team is super alive because now they're very excited about, oh man, because this is a huge pain point for us to have to go through to collect it, to deposit it. I mean, we had an account that just had deposits in it that was over $1 million.
Wow.
That was just sitting there that we needed to just give back anyways. And that's, if you're in any kind of accounting or, you know, the accounts receivable or whatnot, the controller of an organization, you know, like giving money back it's easy to collect. Giving money back is a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
But doing this experiment, we were able to cut the time down from 19 days to 2 days. We were able to process this permit. You would give it in on Wednesday. We'd get it back to you before the end of Thursday.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing. But again, I share this story to highlight what you were talking about in regards to what is lean thinking. Lean thinking is empowerment. Lean thinking is putting the customer first. Lean thinking is understanding that there are things we can change. Let's see what it is. Let's experiment. Let's reframe and reimagine. Yeah. I have a lot of re's in my mind.
And so much of what you said there in terms of it's people coming together who understand what the customer wants, what the process is. So if we try one thing as a group and it doesn't work, instead, you know, we are together. We can resolve this. We can keep working on it. It's that kind of team motivation as well. That's part of lean thinking and a lean approach, whereby it's this shared idea of shared responsibility. It's not just me, I make a mistake, that's my problem. It's this thing of, what are we going to do? Let's go out and try this. Let's bring our experiences back to the group. And if one of us is saying something doesn't work, right, let's put our heads together and figure out how to resolve that. So it's this whole idea of working together. And look what you guys did. I mean, it didn't work the first time. You came back, and which is the key, which is those check cycles. You came back after you did something to check in to see, did it work or would it work? Okay, no. Then let's go back to our actions and revisit them and think again and plan again and do again. And that, I think, is so key to lean. I think I'm delighted that you expanded on my original thinking, because I do always start with the people and involving people, but the system you work in and the structures you use and the way that you facilitate and collaborate, that is so crucial to lean, I guess, being a success and being able to take into account failures and challenges and manage them. So I think it's an excellent example. And I just think so many of us out there, that kind of thing happens, but often we don't do what you guys did. We don't come back to the drawing board and look for a different way. We just stop.
And say, I guess we can't change it. And maybe there's some things that you can't, but I will also say that lean isn't about solving every problem, because there are some problems that aren't worth solving. Like it's just going to take either too much resources, too much time, or spending the time on it for the results you're going to get isn't worth it. There's probably better things that we could try to resolve and try to reimagine. You know, but sure. I think, you know, one of the things that comes to mind, you know, in regards to our listening audience, you know, is, okay, how do you set this up? How do you reframe failure to experiments? And immediately the buzzword, but also it's super powerful, is psychological safety, making it okay. Like that, you just have to be okay with, hey, this could just fall flat on its face. Like, and that's okay. Because the second thing that if we're talking to leaders or those that are, work with teams, creating that psychological space, but also some kind of a structure, we've mentioned it several times, and that could be in the tools that you use. It could be in just, one of the structures for that experience that I just talked about with the permitting. We had a pilot that was a structure. Those were boundaries. That pilot basically means we tried a small experiment. Okay, here's a new way of doing things. And we specifically chose who's going to do it. We didn't cast it out to the whole agency, everybody. We chose a small group. We chose a time frame. We gave them what they needed. So that was the structure. It wasn't just, hey, go figure out how to do this differently. The team empowered, coming together, said, okay, let's do it this way. Okay, we created kind of that SOP, that standard operating procedure. Hey, try it this way for this long, to get this many through to see, and let's track it. Let's make sure that it does in fact improve and not make it worse. Because if we don't have metrics, then you can't manage what you don't measure. But that was the structure to it. So the two things that I think of, and maybe you have some others in regards to leadership and teams, how they can work this in regards to lean thinking and whatnot, psychological safety, and a systemized problem solving. Some kind of a structure for solving your problems. What else would you add to that?
Hello, everyone. I am sorry to interrupt this episode of the Lean Solutions podcast, but I wanted to take a moment to invite you to pick up a copy of my Shingo award-winning book, Avoiding the Continuous Appearance Trap. In the book, I contrast the cultures of two companies I worked for. And though each started with similar lean models, one was mechanistic and only gave the appearance of lean, while the other developed a true culture of continuous improvement. The contrast provides a vivid example of the difference between fake lean and true lean. You can find the book on Amazon. Simply search my name or the title of the book. You aren't a reader? No worries. The audiobook is also available on Audible. Now, back to the show.
Okay, I do agree on psychological safety. Well, so much of what you talked about was about leadership, setting the scene, telling people it's okay, expecting the failures and challenges. All of that I totally agree with. I guess, is there anything else I could add to that? What I was thinking when you were talking was about what I often hear from leaders in organizations who are trying to be lean and do things like very lean practices like huddles or Gemba walks, right?
Sure.
And often when I meet them and I bring up the concept, these people I work with wouldn't be new to lean. They would have some sort of lean training or background. But often when I say to them, okay, where are we with huddles? Have you tried huddles? And so much of the time I'll get the answer, yeah, we tried those, but they didn't really work. Or Gemba walk, yeah, we tried them, but no, we don't do them anymore, right? So in my mind, okay, it's sort of, you could look at that as a failure because it didn't work and it stopped, right? So in my mind, I guess that's what they felt it was a failure, right? So, but if we reframe failure, and this tells me that leaders, especially who are working with people to drive this lean methodology and lean approach, they really need to understand failure. They really need to understand that failure doesn't mean we tried it and stopped. That's not what we do when we come up against something that doesn't work. What we do is we reflect on why it didn't work, and we look to say, well, what tweaks or adaptations can we make and try it again? Because we know that the huddles would be a great thing to have. We can understand the benefits of them. They just didn't work for us. But that's the part for me that's missing. It's this, I guess, continuous approach to development, which I feel is really, really important. So as well as making people feel safe enough to speak up and understand and define the problems and failures, as well as putting a structure in place, the plan, the do, the check, the act. It's also about motivating people from the external, I suppose, to be able to say, well, that's okay, it didn't work, but let's track back. And let's figure out how to do it again. Let's keep going. It's this inspirational piece where you go, let's keep go. We can do this. And I know we mention Ryan Tierney a lot, but I think when you listen to him speak, he does that so well. He explains that so well. He was on the podcast a few episodes ago, and he does that. So he's able to say, okay, right, that's where we're at. Let's see what we need to do to make it work. It's okay if it doesn't work now. And I think it's this kind of optimism, maybe. Is that what I'm getting to? I don't know.
Yeah. Optimism works.
It's this sense of we can do it. If we want it badly enough and we want something to work and we want to find a better way, we will find a better way. So it's attitude, it's optimism beyond telling people, it's okay, and beyond putting in structure. It's what you bring as yourself to the table, how you present yourself to people and what you say to keep their spirits up. And I think that's actually an important part of managing challenges. in my experience, but also, my beliefs.
I summarize that because I think of all those things you just mentioned, the optimism and all of that. The word that comes to mind is pursuit. It's that, oh man, we're going to, there's something there, not pursuit in the more like tiring sense, but pursuit in that excited sense. I mean, this is really cheesy and childish because we're going to talk about children, but remember playing tag as a kid, really simple goal. We just chase after people. And it was that excitement of, hey, there could be something else out there. And I think in the business world and in organizations, to recapture that and to have that, reminder of what our why is, who our customer is, how we're serving them, and to once again get excited about reinventing whatever it is we're doing so that we can continue to do that, so that we can continue to improve that pursuit of whatever the goal is, whatever perfection is. I love that idea and that positivity that goes with that. And just that childhood glee of chasing after something. With not sure if you're going to get it or not, but you're going to chase after it, doggone it. And it's going to be like wild wind blowing in your hair. You're just going after it.
Actually, Shayne, like I do remember reading a study about what fun so workplaces are not typically fun, right? Unless you work in, I don't know, a theme park or something I don't know, but it's typically not. But a group of people were surveyed about what they thought was fun in the workplace. And the most common answer was solving problems together. This whole idea of innovation, coming up with something new and ideas. So, there is something in this. There is something in this about, I guess, the tone that you set as a leader with your people around all of this. So I guess you're going from one end of the scale to, solve that problem, improve that, don't make mistakes while you're doing it, get it right, up to, okay, mistakes are probably part of the process. Let's do our best. If it happens, come on, and like, let's have a bit of fun while we're doing this and work together. And there's, like you said earlier, there's a bit of a scale there, and I guess none of us are maybe at the bottom or the top, but we all fall somewhere. So maybe the question is, where are we on that scale, and could we do anything to move the scale maybe to where it needs to be? Maybe it doesn't need to be at the very top where we're all positive about these things, and maybe people don't really go for that in our organization or company, but maybe we could do it a little bit more positivity and a little bit more enthusiasm and a little bit more, support around when mistakes happen. So it's just about sliding the scale a little bit to understand if that would have a positive impact on the company. And I think it would, if we all did that exercise,
I don't have data for this, and I am just talking off the top of my head. But I wonder if our management style that we've continued to hold on to, and I'm speaking in generalities, not everyone does this, but the management style seems to be almost like the industrial management style, where we're just working with machines and we're just producing widgets and just pull the handle and push it along, rather than understanding, hey, my business is actually made of people. And all of and so what is it that's going to excite my people? What is it's going to inspire my people? Because these are human beings, just like I am. What excites me? What inspires me? Maybe there's something similar that I can do with my team in that empowerment, that getting involved, that giving agency and ownership to be able to make the changes. That's really, as you mentioned before, that is so foundational to what lean thinking is. Just that, that little experiment, put on your lab coat, get your beakers, and let's just kind of, do some things and try some kind of things, come up with a hypothesis. I think if we do this is what's going to happen. Okay. Let's see it.
Well, we know, like, lean is science. It is supposed to be scientific thinking. We just don't practice that a lot. So that scientific part, I think, is the key to managing failures or challenges, isn't it? Really, it does.
Yeah.
have to come back to that. Like it's
Because
a
science doesn't look at failure as a negative thing.
yes,
Science
that's
looks
it.
at failure
An
as,
experiment.
okay,
Yeah,
we tried this. What's
yeah,
next?
yes.
I mean, that's kind of what failure is what's next?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's what
so
it
what's
should, yeah,
next?
should be. Yeah. So maybe it's that little step that's missing in a lot of organizations. And yeah, I think there's a lot of food for thought in that, Shayne. And I hope there's some people listening in who are looking at their own position, whether it's a leader or part of a team, and considering how do we view failures? Do we think of failure as a bad thing? Do we beat down on it? Do we try to avoid it? How do we talk about it? I know these are really important questions that I really hope people are asking themselves, because as we said, with the incoming, the next couple of years, we're going to have to get used to the fact that there will be more setbacks, challenges. There is more
uncharted territory.
Yes, exactly. So I really hope that people are considering this,
And another way and we can wrap up here, because I don't need to ramble, but as you were talking about reframing failure, it made me think of something I heard a couple months back in regard to the daily huddles, which if those of you that don't know, daily huddles, basically a time where the team can come together to kind of share information, kind of express any kind of concerns and make a plan for how we can continue to make things better. But a daily huddle sometimes has a board on it, and there's often a color scheme of green, we met our goal; yellow, we don't have enough information; or red, we didn't meet our goal. And instead of thinking of red, what I heard from this person I was listening to, instead of thinking of red as a failure, didn't meet our goal, red means, hey, focus on here. Here's some attention. It's blinking red to get our attention, not to say, you loser, I can't believe you did this, you're supposed to avoid this. It's, hey, here's focus over here. Pick me, because here is an opportunity to improve.
Yes. Yeah. Great example. Yeah. Yeah. And it is all about our approach to it, isn't it? It is. Our approach to it makes the world of difference to the people working in the organization around us.
And I think that's huge. And it's something that I know we try to communicate through the podcast, and hopefully you, the listening and watching audience, have picked up on this. Lean is a practice. It's a mindset. It's not, it has tools, but that's not lean. Tools don't make the lean. Lean is the mindset. Lean is the practice of continuing, your PDCA that you talked about earlier, Catherine. It's not just, well, we'll just pull a book off the shelf and, oh, there's this tool and this tool and this tool, let's see if we can use it. But you have to have that mindset first.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. So at the end of our last episode, Patrick said to me, so, any last words, Catherine? And I was, thinking for a second. I was saying, oh my God, you know what? I feel like I haven't, if we could use the word failure or I feel like I haven't experimented enough. Now I use the word failure, but now I'm going to use the word experiment because I love your word. I feel like I haven't experimented enough, because these people who are really successful, they've been through massive experiments, and it didn't always go their way. So the bigger the experiment, the bigger the risk sometimes, the more reward in the end, as long as you keep experimenting. So I was saying to Patrick, I feel like, oh my God, I just haven't done enough now, because to be successful like them, like I just need more failures, more experiments. And it makes me think that way, which is good, which is the way you need to think if you're going to actually come out of, to meet your goals, especially if you have big goals, right? So so any kind of, I suppose, last thoughts from yourself, Shayne, like how does all of this impact how you go into the future as a lean practitioner? How does it influence you, and what do you think?
I mean, as a lean practitioner, that also means that I need to do lean, not just teach lean, not just help other companies and organizations, do lean activities. And the word that comes to mind, and it's because of where we're at in this time of year, is intentionality. I need to be intentional. And for me, intentionality means I keep, one eye on that goal. Like, what's that ultimate goal? And then adjust intentionally, not just going through the motions sometimes you just have to put your head down, but other times you have to look up and be reminded, oh, my intention is this. Okay, let's continue toward that. Yes. And that's the experimentation and the practice and the grinding. you know, and sometimes it is. I say grinding because really I go back to that 50 before 50. That's really what it was. Like I had to keep that goal, that 50, I need to do 50 miles. And I will wrap up by saying this, it was a grind, but I went from 3 to 4 miles to 5 miles to 8 miles to I was doing 20 miles a day, just trying to get this down. And I ended up doing the 50 before 50 in 17 hours, just like I wanted to do, just like I planned to do, with the help of support staff and, you know, again, bringing people in. I mean, we have this scientific thinking. We use it all the time in our lives. Please, let's start using it in our organizations and how we work with people as well.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more. Well said, Shayne. And we did actually touch on that in the first episode around our passion and purpose and how important that is to drive us to get through setbacks. And we did touch on that. So you could, anybody listening, you could listen back to that as well. But Shayne's last point, I think was very much in line with that type of point as well. So Shayne, thank you very much. It's a pleasure as always. The time always flies when we chat. Your insights are amazing. Your stories are amazing. And I will say goodbye, and we'll say goodbye to our listeners, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
All right. Thanks, guys.